Tiddlywinkles, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me once again. This is another thrilling episode of the Kevin Bass is a Numpty Muppet show. Let's hear some more ridiculous nonsense, some more complete, absolutely anti-scientific garbage, some pustulous excremental rubbish from the terminally ill-informed Kevin Bass, and we'll put him right where he's wrong, which, spoiler, boys and girls, guess what? Is fucking everywhere. All right, off you go, Kev.
Hey, everybody, this is Kevin Bass at thedietwars.com, and you may have heard when looking around on social media and even on some health websites that lower LDL cholesterol or lower total cholesterol is associated with a higher risk of death.
Okay, right. So there's your first mistake, which is a mistake that you've made, I don't know how many times, Kevin, even since I've been aware of your existence, and it's one that's common, but that doesn't make it any more forgivable, and it needs to stop. It needs to stop today. The use of the word risk. Okay, risk is a cause and effect statement. It implies, or indeed explicitly states, really, by lack of a clear statement to the contrary, that if you moderate a certain input behavior, then the likelihood of an output, changes as a result of the change in your behavior. There is no experimental evidence extant anywhere in the literature to support such a claim regarding risk of cardiovascular disease and any aspect of the lipoproteins at all. Not one single data point exists. Risk is a word that is completely inappropriate here. What you are talking about is incidence, Kevin, not risk. Incidence and risk are not the same thing. That which occurred or was observed to occur in a population of people in the past has no bearing on what may occur in a different population of people in the future. The assumption is false to its fundamental flaw. It cannot be supported by science. It is not supported by science. And people who say risk this, risk that, risk the other thing on the basis of what they call prospective cohort studies is ridiculous. By the way, I say what they call prospective cohort studies because they are not prospective. They are retrospective. What happened in a given population of people that we observed in some way in the past that we are now reporting on. Okay? Very straightforward. So from this point forward, every time Kevin says risk, I'll stop the video and say, no, not risk. Cast your mind back to this explanation. Risk is a cause and effect statement. There is no evidence to support a claim of risk. These studies that Kevin is talking about here show incidence, coincidence, okay? Shared variance to some degree or another, which he doesn't even understand, which we'll get to in a minute, between factor X and factor Y. All right? Not risk. Right. Good. I'm glad I got that off my chest for the billionth time in my life. What's next, Kev?
So you want higher cholesterol, higher LDL cholesterol to have a lower risk of...
No, not risk. No. And changing your behavior will have no impact on your likelihood of an outcome because the two things are not causally connected in any way.
Death, because if you have it too low, you're going to have a higher risk of death.
No, not risk.
Make sure not to get your cholesterol levels too low. That's dangerous.
Well, it is, but not because of risk. It is because of clear mechanistic results that will occur in your health markers, health status as a result of compromising your natural or naturally expressed lipoprotein levels in your blood, which are under the control of your genes, those genes knowing what they're doing exactly, actually, Kevin. So that there are bad effects of lowering your cholesterol directly because you have lowered your cholesterol, and there are also bad effects because of the dangerous contraindicated metabolic poisons that are used for this purpose, mostly, i.e. statins, the most common form of pharmacological intervention to one's cholesterol levels. dangerous, poisonous, contraindicated, should never, ever be prescribed to any person under any circumstances, ought to be withdrawn, ought to be banned. The companies that make them ought to be sued for billions of dollars. Those are the facts. Sorry about those. What's next?
This claim is made based off of a really large literature.
A really large literature. What's a really large literature?
More than 50 years old.
So, and it's not actually based off that at all, Kevin. How do you know what it's based off? You think it's based off a 50-year-old study? It's not. We can have a look at some really quite recent data, which is not even in a peer-reviewed paper. It's not published as such. These are two independent data sets collected independently by two so-called respectable authorities, one being the World Health Organization and the other being the British Heart Foundation. This is data which correlates the level of cholesterol in the blood of people in, I think it's 168 different countries and territories around the world, and the incidence of death for any cause, and for a number of specific sub-causes teased out separately as well on the same chart. It's quite telling, and it shows us very, very clearly that as the cholesterol level drops below 220 milligrams per deciliter, that the incidence of mortality goes up precipitously. It means quite steeply. It means quite meaningfully. It means look at the slope on this graph for the incidence of death. It's the blue line, by the way. It's incredible. It's really, really marked. It's a very, very clear and stark coincidence between these two factors, death and cholesterol that's below 220 total cholesterol. Okay? So that's not 50-year-old data. That's quite recent data. So no, Kevin, it's not based off 50-year-old data. And even if it was, so what? If the 50-year-old data is valid and correct, then it's still a meaningful finding, isn't it?
Of observational studies where they look at what is your cholesterol level or your LDL cholesterol level.
Your total or your LDL individually, which is a crazy distinction to make for several reasons. First of all, LDL cholesterol is not even measured in a laboratory test, in a blood test of your cholesterol levels. It's estimated. Did you know that? Not even measured, Kevin. Okay, so there's the first problem with it. There'll be an error of estimation because of the fact that it is estimated. Secondly, that proportion of the cholesterol, which is touted as being LDL cholesterol, is absolutely, fundamentally, utterly identical on a molecular level to all the other cholesterol. So good cholesterol and bad cholesterol are identical. They are the same cholesterol. They are the same stuff. Absolutely identical stuff. So, oops. We're doing well, aren't we, on the logic front? All right, carry on though, Kev. You're doing well, son. Keep it up.
And how often are you going to die, or what is
well, just once, Kevin, generally. Most people die just the one time, okay?
Your frequency of death, your risk of death?
My frequency of death will be once when that occurs at some point in the future. The incidence of death in a population, yes, that's a fair metric. How many people in a given population or a given subpopulation died in a given period of time? Okay, good.
In, say, 5 or 10 years of follow-up. So they take all the people that say...
All the people. No, they don't, Kevin. They take a relatively small population or subpopulation of people. And usually in these observational studies, what they do on purpose is select an aged population who have a vastly increased incidence of death at baseline, precisely because of their age and stuff, so that they get actually any decent amount of death at all, so that they can even reach a statistical significance. So, ergo, none of these studies are representative of a generalised population, and as such, the utility of these findings when trying to extrapolate to a completely different subpopulation of people is totally flawed, completely inappropriate and anti-scientific in the highest order. Whoops.
Have a 70 milligram per deciliter LDL cholesterol level, all the people with 80, all the people with 90, all the people with 100, and say, what's proportion of each group dies? And what they found in these studies is that the people with lower LDL cholesterol, like 70, 80, 60, have a higher risk of dying.
No, not risk.
Whenever you follow up on them, you find more of them are dead.
Yes, incidence.
And this is referred to as the cholesterol paradox.
Well, only by people who don't understand cholesterol or why it's not a paradox. It's not a paradox at all. It's what we would expect to see.
Dozens and dozens of papers have been published on this showing this.
Yes, because it's a real thing. There is a clear relationship. Those with lower cholesterol, lower than 220 total, are expressed more often in death statistics in the population than folks who sit around 220.
And many, many different populations all around the world.
That's right. So we know this. Good. So ergo, what that suggests to us is that given that we have a huge, vast, massive associative data set, that tells us this very clearly. That suggests to us very clearly that we should probably not attempt to lower the blood cholesterol below its genetically determined level at around about 220, it seems. That would seem to make some pretty good sense, wouldn't it? On a precautionary principle, your genes know what they're doing. Of course they do. They've survived probably 13,800 million years at least of positive and negative selection pressures. The cholesterol level in the blood is what it ought to be. Perhaps we should just let the body get on with it.
It's a well-established phenomenon. It shows that if you have a really low level of LDL cholesterol...
No. Below 220 is not really, really low, Kevin. Any level below 220 total cholesterol is associated with a vast, precipitous increase in the relative incidence of death in those populations. Huge. The slope of that line is massive. Okay?
You have a much higher risk of death.
No, not risk.
Okay. So then, therefore, some people conclude from this that you should therefore try to have a higher LDL cholesterol and a higher total cholesterol.
No, you should just leave your body to it. Your body will set what your cholesterol level should be on the basis of the situation in which you place your genes. They know what they're doing. Let them do it. Leave it alone. This is not an area for intervention. This is not a health concern. This is certainly not something that you should take a drug for under any circumstances, ever. Any drug.
More healthy because it's going to reduce your chance of dying.
No. That's a cause and effect statement. There is no evidence to support that claim.
This conclusion, actually, though, is not based in the evidence.
Right. That is correct, Kevin. It is not. There is no evidence that you should attempt in any way to influence your cholesterol level either upward or downward.
This is only one subsection of studies, and it is a very important subsection of studies because it helps us to understand the relationship between LDL cholesterol and death. And it needs to be done. These studies need to be done in order to confirm that LDL cholesterol levels are reducing them is a good thing.
No, that's false. There is no evidence to support that claim. It is not a good thing to lower your LDL.
But it would be a misinterpretation to suggest that these studies indicate that you should maintain higher LDL cholesterols in order to avoid death.
These studies suggest you should leave the body to it. It knows what it's doing. Let it do that.
This isn't supported by the evidence. And in this video, I'm going to explain why that's the case.
Well, this will be fun. Can't wait.
So here is this paper. It's called And again, this is just like 50, 100 different papers, a million different papers.
A 50, 100, or a million, Kevin? Which is it?
That are showing the same thing. It's called association between low density lipoprotein and all-cause and cause-specific mortality in Denmark, a prospective cohort study.
No, it's not. It's retrospective. This reports on what has happened in the past. Okay. It does not inform on what is likely to happen in the future. See how that's quite a different thing?
Okay. And as we can see, when we look at...
Well, we could see if you'd stop pissing around with the page and moving it around and scrolling up and down, and if you could let us see the actual scale on the x-axis on this chart, Kevin, perhaps, because we can't see what that is at all.
The first figure, the more your...
Jesus Christ, leave the page still.
LDL cholesterol, the more your LDL cholesterol, the greater your risk of all-cause mortality.
No, that graph doesn't support that claim, Kevin. You've misinterpreted that graph visually. Have a look at the dotted lines around the purple line. Look at the lower 95% confidence interval bound of that curve. When the LDL, so-called cholesterol, as estimated and not measured in a blood test, exceeds 140 milligrams per deciliter, so that would be in line with someone at around about 220 total cholesterol, wouldn't it, Kev? Yep, good. What you will find above that level is that there is a very, very just statistically significant increase in the average, or the least squares regression is what we should call it, line. However, that dotted line only just painfully ekes away from the 1.0 line there and that's nuts. There's no meaningful finding there whatsoever. Anywhere above 140 milligrams per deciliter of estimated LDL cholesterol up to whatever that top value is right on the right-hand side of this chart over here. See that? See where that dotted line is? Just above that 1.0 incidence ratio? There's nothing to see here, Kevin. You've misinterpreted this completely. Whoops. That's what happens when you're an incompetent, anti-scientific ideologue without the first semblance of training in statistics, statistical inference, and what it all means, Kevin. So no, it does not show an increase in LDL cholesterol as associated meaningfully with anything whatsoever. Whoopsie. Carry on though, son. You're doing great.
Death from any cause. Okay? Death from any cause.
You said that, and it's wrong. It doesn't show that.
The higher your LDL cholesterol,
You just said that, and it doesn't show that on this graph. You're wrong, Kevin.
higher the risk.
No, not risk.
If it's really high, but if you get to a certain...
No. Again, look at this chart, Kevin. It shows otherwise. It shows that there is nothing to see here, in fact.
certain point, about 140, you have the lowest risk of death.
No, not risk. Incidence.
From any cause.
No.
And then when you get really low, you have much higher risk. In fact, the low...
No. No. Less than 1.5 absolute change in incidence and not risk is nothing to write home about. That's what we're looking at over here. Nothing to write home about at all. What is the baseline incidence of death in these populations, Kev? I'll tell you what it is. Most likely, I don't know, I haven't looked at this paper, but if I did look into it, I'd find that that's what it is. Generally, they take populations of people who are age 65 and above at the outset, precisely in order to have a likelihood that the person will die and there'll be something to actually report on. Generally, in such populations, the incidence of death per person per year of follow-up is around about 8 per 10,000. So a 0.5 change on that baseline is an additional 4 events of death per 10,000 person years of follow-up, which for the individual, for any living human being, any individual living human being over a 100-year lifespan, is 2/3 of 5/8 of fuck all. It's not worth even thinking about. It's of no value. It's of no utility, even if it was causal, which this isn't. This is associative, health user bias, etc. Okay, this is just nonsense, Kevin. Absolute, utter nonsense from start to finish. Nothing to see here at all.
Low people who have really, really low have a higher risk of death than the people who have
No, not risk. And they don't.
really, really high. Okay?
Really, really high is not a scientific assessment of a data set, Kevin. Data is the thing, the empirical data is the thing that we use to litigate science. It's already litigated. It's on this chart that you're showing us right now. And this chart shows us that there is nothing whatever of utility or value to see here. Nothing whatever. Okay?
So again, this demonstrates this so-called cholesterol paradox.
Doesn't. It doesn't demonstrate anything whatsoever. And it's not a paradox.
And it's an important thing to remember and to think about.
Yes, I have thought about it quite deeply over nearly the entire period of time that you've been alive, Kevin, as a senior lecturer, a senior academic, a professor of health science. I've been thinking about this since you were knee-high to a grasshopper's son, deeply, and you clearly don't have the first clue about what you're talking about with regards to any of this. It's embarrassing for you, son. You're completely out of your lane, completely out of your depth. You're a student, and clearly not a very good one. Okay?
But we need to place this in the right context.
For those that don't know, Kevin has no qualifications that are relevant to this topic area. He's a student, and not a very good one.
So let's look at the way that the authors, the study authors, tried to explain this.
Why? Science is litigated empirically. It needs no commentary from the people that collected the data or otherwise. All we have to do is look at the data, and it was quite clear.
It says possible explanations for our
Possible, yes, that leaves the other thing on the table as well. Maybe not two.
findings. The association
Hear that, Kev?
between low levels of LDL-C and an increased risk
No, not risk. Incidence.
of all-cause mortality could be explained.
And could be, maybe not two. See how that's done? See how they've done that with their commentary, Kev? That's how they got it published. That's how they got their opinion published, by disclaiming it with words like maybe, possibly, could be, hypothesis. We don't need to hear this, Kevin. This is of no value. We've already looked at the data and seen for ourselves quite clearly with a competent check on that data set that it shows us nothing whatsoever. Can we move on?
By reverse causation.
Reverse causation is a buzz term made up by some people. It's ridiculous. X causes Y or it doesn't. Reverse causation. My word. My word. Ridiculous.
Debilitation and illness.
Debilitation, not depilitation. Depilitation is removing your hair, Kevin. Debilitation, I think, is what you meant.
Have been hypothesized to cause
There you go. See, hypothesis. That means educated guess. Yeah?
a decrease in levels of cholesterol. And I'm going to interrupt right there.
Yeah, so there are various illnesses, the process of which lead people's cholesterol levels to become lowered. Yes. There are also disease processes which cause people's cholesterol to become raised above baseline as well. That's the body responding to the situation at hand. You know, remember how I said before, you place your genes in a certain environment and in a certain context at a given time, and those genes react in such a way as to maximize your chance of survival. That's what they do.
Before I continue reading, to explain what they mean by this.
Well, this will be amusing.
So, if you have a debilitation or an illness,
Yes.
it can cause your low LDL cholesterol.
Yes.
and then it can cause death.
Yes. Well, a disease can cause death. Yes. A dysfunction can cause death. Yes. Changes in your lipid profile in your blood are not a disease process. They're a signal. They're a symptom.
But the thing that's causing death is not the low LDL cholesterol, it is the illness.
Oh, right. So illnesses cause death, not lowered cholesterol. So why is the same thing not true on the other side of the graph where your proposed increase of risk, which we've already shown doesn't exist even, let's say it did just for fun, why is it causal on the right-hand side of the curve but not on the left? What magic thing happens at the average value of cholesterol that changes the causality thing to completely change ass about face, Kevin? Explain that to us. Shall we wait? I think perhaps we should move on because we have other things to do today. We'll be waiting a long time for an explanation on that. Right, so lowered cholesterol doesn't cause death, but increased cholesterol does. Okay. Wow, buffoon.
The illness is causing both the low cholesterol and the increased risk of death.
Yes, and other diseases cause both an increased level of cholesterol and death. Same thing applies on the right-hand side of the curve as it does on the left-hand side, Kevin. My word, did you even subject your ridiculous pseudo-logic to 3 seconds of basic logical cursory refutation before you opened your stupid mouth, Kevin? No, the boy did not do that, did he? Rather than what he should have done, which was to think about what he was saying before he said it, instead, he just did this.
Blah, 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 blah. Finished.
Not good enough, Kevin. Not good enough by a long, long stick. If you were a student sitting in my undergraduate physiology class, you would be coming back next semester to repeat the module. You'd fail, Kevin. Badly. You'd get an F or lower. This is pathetic. This is ridiculous.
It's not that the low levels of LDL cholesterol are
Yes, you've said that. We understand. Clearly better than you do, because you think that suddenly at the nadir point on a curve, that the rules of the universe suddenly change at the nadir point for some reason. Okay, buffoon.
causing the death. Each are being caused by something.
By the way, Kevin said, I don't want to pick a fight with him because I'm completely outclassed and he's going to destroy me and he's going to teach me a lesson about science. What do you think, boys and girls? Leave a comment below about who's teaching who a lesson about science here. Yeah, stunning. It's the syndrome that Kevin has here, among others perhaps, is called Dunning-Kruger syndrome. It means that he is so vastly, hugely destitute of competence that he is unable to grasp the depth of his own incompetence. He doesn't. It's like you don't know what you don't know. He's so stupid that he doesn't know how stupid he is. And his arrogance won't allow him to actually humble himself and learn from someone like me who is vastly more knowledgeable and experienced in this field. No, he's going to teach me a lesson. Actually, what he's going to do is show up for a half-hour discussion with me about some data in another paper about LDL, get embarrassed by me absolutely, completely destroyed, and then run away with shit in his pants and never talk to me again. I'm not talking to you anymore because... Well, we know why, Kevin. You thought you'd save face by running away. You've actually made it worse for yourself, son, because I'm going to be all over you. I am going to fucking destroy you. Systematically, I'm going to lead you around the ring by the nose and drag your face into every turnbuckle on all four corners until there's nothing left to see. And you've chosen to put yourself in a position where you will have no opportunity to defend yourself. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people are going to see my videos about what a buffoon you are before you've even graduated from medical school. You finished some. You're done. Before you even started. And it's your own doing. Okay? Others, please learn from Kevin's errors. Right, carry on, Kev.
Something else independently. And again, LDL cholesterol is itself not leading to the greater risk of death. So
that's right. Either way, up or down. Good, we're getting somewhere.
You increase it. Let's say you have this kind of illness and then you increase your LDL cholesterol. You're not going to decrease your risk of death whatsoever.
Right. So you shouldn't intervene because it won't affect your so-called risk, which is not actually risk, it's incidence, because you're talking about retrospective studies on what happened in the past, Kevin, and no cause and effect data is available here. There are no experiments whatsoever in existence anywhere. Wow. Well, let's all pay attention to Kevin, though, because he's the competent one and I'm the one that's going to get taught a lesson here.
It's not going to help you at all because the LDL cholesterol isn't causing the death.
There you go. In a nutshell, this is the same Kevin Bass who I critiqued on my channel just today, actually, as I record this, saying that everybody should take statin medications. Which is it, Kev? Because those two things are totally mutually exclusive. The LDL is not causing a problem, and you should take statins. A dangerous contraindicated metabolic poison with no established benefits, except to the pharmacological companies that make those statin medications in the billions of dollars a year. That's the only benefit that's established from such things. Okay, what's next?
It's something else causing the death, and the low LDL cholesterol is coming along for the ride as a marker of that thing.
Right. And the same applies on the other side of the nadir on that curve, such that that curve might be expressed to be, given that you look at that dotted line, that shows there is no evidence of increasing incidence, even let alone risk, to speak of the higher, right up to the very highest level, whatever that was, because he didn't show us the scale on that chart that we looked at earlier. Remember?
Okay, so we're going to continue reading. It says, and in this study, comorbidities were more frequent in individuals with the lowest LDL-C.
Do you think that might have been causal? Maybe you've got reverse causality on what caused what. Maybe the low cholesterol had effects on comorbidities in terms of made them be expressed more often in people. Did you think of that, Kevin? That's possible too, isn't it? I'm not saying that was the case. I'm saying it's possible. This data can't show that it's not.
Also consistent with the theory that low levels of LDL-C are an indirect marker of severe disease, the association between low levels of LDL-C and the risk of all-cause mortality was strongest in the
No, not risk.
age and sex-adjusted model, but substantially reduced.
Oh, adjusted models. Good. There's another can of worms we could get into. Adjusted models. Good. You cannot adjust an observation from what it was and report something different from what you observed and claim you are doing science. That is ridiculous. Scientists control factors up front, intervene experimentally, and report what they actually observed, Kevin. That's what science is. What you're talking about here is not science. It's anti-science. Okay? Shall we move on?
When adjusting for baseline comorbidities.
You cannot adjust data and be taken seriously as a scientist. That's not science. That's fabrication. That's making up stories. This story about cholesterol is a great story. It just needed more emphasis on the dragons and perhaps a bit less incest. And a decent ending. My God. Fuck me. Are you joking after 8 seasons? Really? Anyway, that's for another day.
That is to say, if you adjust for disease, you see a much reduced association between low cholesterol and mortality.
There isn't one to speak of in the first place. So adjusting, fabricating one away is really neither here nor there, is it, Kev?
Suggesting that much of that association is due to these diseases.
No, you can't inform on what an association is due to by looking at an association, and you certainly can't inform on what is an association is due to by fabricating it out of existence and pretending it doesn't exist. It still does, such that it does to whatever level it does exist. This coincidence. Do you see how your mad, insane rambling here, Kevin, makes absolutely no sense in logic or reason or science or the actual objective reality in which we find ourselves? I know that you can't see that, Kevin, and it's because you're so hugely destitute of competence in statistical inference. That's why you can't see this. By pretending a data set was something different from what it actually was, by fabricating a different one, we can now inform on the cause and effect relationships between the two things that we haven't observed because we made it up. Good.
But not all of it. So look, it says an association remained after this adjustment, however, and after excluding individuals with less than 5 years of follow-up and known cardiovascular disease, cancer, and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease at baseline. So
those people should have been excluded from the data set in the first instance. They should never have been in the data set if you're looking at so-called prospective studies on health outcomes. They're a different subpopulation. They needed their own study, people with established heart disease at the outset, because the incidence of secondary events per person per year of follow-up is vastly higher than the incidence of primary events per person per year of follow-up in those that have never had an event previously. It's totally inappropriate to have them mixed in the first place. And you certainly can't remove their influence through multivariate adjustment. That is not possible to do. It cannot inform on cause and effect. All you're doing is looking at multiple associations, none of which are causal. It's crazy. It's ridiculous. It's laughable. Anyone with more than 5 minutes of statistical training knows exactly what I'm talking about and is laughing along with me. That's why you're not laughing, Kevin, because you don't have 5 minutes training in this area. What's next?
This association remained no matter what. They can't get rid of it by just getting
You
rid of it.
can't get rid of an observed phenomena. If you observe something occurred, it did. The observation was made. You can't get rid of that. Sorry about that.
Of all the people who have diseases. It's not important to read the rest because it's just...
Because you don't understand it, Kevin. Okay, good.
Is going to say what I'm about to say already. They adjusted for cardiovascular disease, cancer, and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease.
Right, so the study is completely invalid then because they're reporting on a fantasy. They're reporting on an outcome that they made up, not something they observed. That's not science. We're done.
The key word here is known. It's known, right?
You said that. You said that. When Kevin was young, he must have tripped over and hit his head on a record player. But I think he's all right now. He's all right now. He's all right now. He's all right now.
Are other people with diseases that are not known?
Everybody over about 50 is laughing with me, and everybody under 50 is going, what? It's generational.
That are going to cause low cholesterol levels and that are therefore going to drive some of that remaining association with death. And that's my interpretation of this literature.
Well, your interpretation is vastly, grossly, hugely destitute of competence, Kevin. You're a buffoon. You're out of your depth. You're not a scientist. You're not a scientist's asshole, in fact. You are a student. A student that would not pass my level 100 undergraduate paper in basic scientific evaluation, let alone anything specific to do with health, physiology, cardiovascular pathophysiology, or any of those other things that I absolutely am demonstrably expert in, Kevin. Okay? You'd be repeating the class. In fact, you probably wouldn't, because I think I'd probably exclude you as having absolutely no hope of ever passing the class, and as such, it would be irresponsible of the institution to take your money. Okay? Because you have no prayer, no hope of ever getting this into your head. Because it takes an IQ in triple digits, Kevin. That's why.
Now, we need to understand why that's the case. Why is it the case that low LDL cholesterol is caused by these diseases, and how does low LDL
Well, that's a mechanistic speculation. We can look at it and hypothesize.
cholesterol get caused? Like, how do these diseases?
But why is that important? We can speculate, absolutely, Kevin, but why would we? What would there be to gain from that at all, other than the building of smoke and mirrors and ideology?
Is causing low LDL cholesterol? Because once we understand that, we can get a clearer, plausible understanding for how we explain this literature. Okay, so we're going to start with this paper. It's published last year. It's called Malnutrition Affects Cholesterol Paradox in Coronary Artery Disease, a 40,000, essentially, person Chinese cohort study, or in this case, 41,229 Chinese cohort study.
Yeah, that's how I feel often, Kevin, when I'm trying to sit through your fucking postulous, excremental garbage. It's like, wow, fuck, really? Are you going to get on with it at any point? Seriously, son, you couldn't have edited this nonsense out of here? Wow.
Essentially what they did is they adjusted for nutritional
Right,
studies.
well, we're done here then with this paper. We're done. Finished. They adjusted. Okay, this is not an observation that was made. This is a fantasy. This is a fabricated data set. We're done. It doesn't matter what it says from this point on at all. And it says nothing because the confidence interval spans 1. Whoops.
Status, and they write after
So a waste of time, a complete waste of time on so many fronts already. Within seconds, I have pulled this paper down to pieces. This is of no value, Kevin. But you're going to spend minutes on this, I suspect. And it's because you are so vastly destitute of competence.
adjustment for nutritional status, the risk of all-cause
No, not risk.
mortality in patients with low LDL-C levels decreased. So in fact, it went from
In fact, saying in fact doesn't make it any more correct, Kevin. It's still absolute anti-scientific, postulous, excremental garbage. What's next?
high risk
No, not risk. Incidence. And it's not incidence because they've adjusted. So we're done.
of death from low LDL-C.
No. Cause and effect statement. Not supported anywhere in the literature. False.
To low risk of death
No, not risk.
from low LDL-C once you adjust for nutritional status.
Fabricate. Once you make something up, you can show whatever you want, can't you, Kevin? That's what they've done. We're finished.
That's interesting.
Why aren't you finished? Why are you still talking?
In the final multivariate Cox model,
There you go. Multivariate adjustment. Fabrication of data sets. Fantasy. Belongs in the fiction section. Should we move on?
low LDL-C level was related to better prognosis, about 10% better. The conclusion is
What was the signal to noise ratio on that claim you've just made, Kevin? No? Again? We're still waiting? No? All right. Tell us all about your competence again, though, Kevin.
this study demonstrated that the
Tell us again about how you're going to destroy me and teach me a lesson about science, and that I don't want to pick a fight with you because I'm out of my league with you. Oh, my mistake. My mistake entirely.
cholesterol paradox existed in coronary artery disease patients but disappeared after accounting for the effects of malnutrition. That's interesting.
No, it isn't. Not at all.
Before we continue and explain this in greater detail, I want to also mention a similar study showing a similar result called Association of Resting Heart Rate and its change with incident cardiovascular events in middle-aged and older Chinese.
So?
And this is a similar sort of association, paradoxical association.
No, it isn't. At all. There is no paradox here. Where is the paradox?
So we know that having a low baseline heart rate is associated
You said that.
with better outcomes.
So there are a lot of things that are associated with a lot of other things variously. What does that tell us about anything except the association, which is of no value to know about probably in most cases, because most associations are not causal.
Because people are in really good shape, they have good cardiorespiratory fitness, they have a lower heart rate. So
Yes, that's a sweeping generalization.
I have a heart rate as low as like almost as low as 40.
Kevin, I think you've made a mistake there again. I think you're confusing your IQ with your heart rate. Okay?
During the day, I have
Just jokes. Settle down. Relax.
a heart rate in my 50s. So I'm like right at the bottom of this figure. But interestingly, in this population, in other populations, it's different. In other populations,
Oh, God's sake. Spit it out, son. If you've got a point, which I know you don't, fucking make your point.
they show that the higher your heart rate, you actually have a higher cause of death. And
No. No, there's a cause and effect statement again, Kevin. False again.
they don't tend to show at the lower end a lower cause of death. Sorry,
No. Cause and effect statement. False.
higher cause of death at the lower end.
No. Cause and effect statement. False.
But this is one study where I found that, and there's several studies that show this.
No, there aren't. You're talking about cause and effect. There are no studies that talk about cause and effect on death. That would take experimental evidence. There is none. How would you get ethics to find out what kills people, Kevin?
So it depends on the population you're talking about, probably because of differences in BMI. It's not.
So now you want to speculate wildly and completely yourself without any knowledge about physiology whatsoever. Mr. Athlete. By the way, Kevin told us he's an athlete. Okay.
Important, but I want to talk about this figure in particular. So
Why, Kevin? What do you think this figure shows? And when are you going to get to talking about this figure at any point? It says hazard ratio, so that's false for a start. I mean, hazard is another cause and effect statement. It talks about risk. This is incidence, and it's adjusted, so it doesn't even talk about incidence. We're done. Again, finish. This is another piece of fantasy work. And even if it wasn't, what do you think this shows? Look at the signal-to-noise ratio here. It's obvious. It's on the chart. It's drawn there. Dotted lines, in case you didn't know that, Kevin. I'm sure you didn't, because I asked you the other day in person about the R-squared value of a regression line that you were trying to present as evidence of cause and effect, ridiculous in and of itself, and you looked at me like I had two heads and was speaking Swahili or something. You had to have it explained to you, even what was R-squared. What did I mean by R-squared? What is that? You didn't know, Kevin. What makes you think you're competent to speak about statistical inference? And you don't even know that. You'd learn that in the first half hour of your first undergraduate statistics course with me, son. So what do you think this graph shows? Let's hear it.
even though athletes tend to be like down here at the very bottom, right? They tend to live longer.
No, they don't necessarily. In fact, athletes in general tend to actually not do well lifespan-wise, Kevin. You're just making shit up. Complete fallacies. It's not even right. It's not, the association even that you are suggesting is not true. It's 180 degrees out of phase with actual reality, Kevin. Wow.
The people with the lowest baseline heart rates had the highest risk of death.
No, not risk. No. Fuck.
Well, why?
Well, they don't. So why would you ask why? Because there's no reason to suggest they do. You just made a cause and effect statement. You said risk. No, Kevin. We're done here.
It's probably the same thing then. So it's probably malnutrition issue.
All right, so another wild guess, another complete speculative guess. Based on what, Kevin? Are you stoned? That might explain things a bit, maybe.
why would malnutrition cause a lower heart rate?
Cause, no. Cause is definitely a cause and effect statement, isn't it, Kevin? So no. Wrong again.
Let's dive into it now. So here's a paper from 1974, in fact, called The Effect
Jesus, really?
of Body Weight Changes on Plasma Lipids in Patients with Primary Hyperlipoproteinemia.
Proteinemia. It's called lipoproteinemia.
It's by Litch, Bolzano, Erbst.
Oh, who cares? And we can fucking see that, Kevin. Do you want to make any point here at all?
Saylor, Sandhofer, and Braunsteiner from the
We're not going to get through this, by the way, because I'm going to stop this before we get to an hour long. I think we get the point. I think we can see what the problems here are with our friend Kevin. If you want an umbrella overall summation of the problem, Dunning-Kruger, arrogance, stunning ignorance, lack of understanding of science, statistics, physiology, pharmacology, or anything of any value here to a so-called aspiring physician. Absolutely, folks, though, if Kevin ever does graduate and qualify as a physician, absolutely go and trust your health with this boy. If you want to. It's your funeral, literally. Go ahead. And I wish you every success in your upcoming career, Kevin T. He.
University of Innsbruck in Austria. Okay. So what they found when they took people who had genetically high levels of cholesterol and they severely restricted them causing fat.
Severely. That's a value judgment statement from you, Kevin. Science is litigated empirically. What are the numbers?
In fact, they did total starvation. What they found is, of course, they found a reduction in their body weight, and they did this, I think, for a couple weeks. They found a reduction in body weight. They also found on almost all the patients, no matter what the genetic problem was, they found a drastic reduction in cholesterol.
Well, I wonder why. I don't wonder why. I know why. When you put people in a starvation mode, why the cholesterol in their blood might drop. It's pretty straightforward as to why that would be the case.
Blood cholesterol from short-term starvation.
You said that, Kevin. We understand.
Now things are starting to come together a little bit.
No, they're not, Kevin. Not for you, son. It's only getting worse for you.
Think back to what we just saw. People with
nothing. We saw a chart that showed us absolutely nothing of value whatsoever from a data set that was fabricated by some people anyway. An associative, a fabricated association.
With cancer, people with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, people with cardiovascular disease, people with severe diseases often start wasting away. In fact, we know that about cancer especially.
Yes.
Called cancer cachexia.
Yes.
So people with cancer cachexia start losing weight.
You said that.
Drop weight. They're in a state of calorie restriction. Okay?
No, they're not in a state of calorie restriction often. Often, cancer patients are vastly, hugely overfed precisely in order to try and counteract the loss of muscle mass that they experience anyway. Which doesn't work because calories in, calories out doesn't work. Universally, predictably, or in every circumstance. I've covered that elsewhere in great detail and we'll continue to do so. You're welcome. Right, anyway, that's enough. We're done here. Kevin has no point to make. Kevin has nothing of value to add to anything here. This is about 1/4 of Kevin's video that I've got through in an hour. That's how wrong Kevin has been in that short 11 minutes and 50 seconds out of 39 minutes and 40. And it's taken me nearly an hour to explain how wrong this boy is. How vastly wrong. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you got something from it. Join me next time when someone will be wrong on interwebs, and it'll probably be Kevin again. Or Greg Douchebag. or Gillian fucking Michaels, or one of these absolute cockmonkey fuckheads with not the first fucking clue of what they're talking about. But I'll keep pointing to it. You're welcome. See you then. Let's have some music to see us out. 2, 3, 4.